This happened when I was about 12 years old. Back then, we had to move out a lot because of my dad's job. Sometimes we had to live in far rural areas for years. Some of the houses we lived in were old, creepy houses that give off an eerie atmosphere. But however creepy they were, nothing can compare to what happened in this very house. The house was a rustic wooden house, probably built a few good decades before we moved in. It was situated in a large, secluded compound in the suburbs, far from the neighborhoods. I'm not sure how old it is, but the balusters of the staircase were beautifully crafted. But the old house must have been unoccupied for a long time, because on the first day we arrived, the entire place was covered in dust and cobwebs. I didn't know back then why they would leave a grand old house without any housekeeper. There were 3 bedrooms and all of them were upstairs. Downstairs, there were a living room, a kitchen, and a storage room. The previous owner kept old broken down things in the storage room and kept it locked. The entire house was painted in wild reds, so it always looked dark and gloomy. My family consisted of the 4 of us: my father, my mother, my sister, and me. I was the youngest of all and was probably the least brave. I've never slept alone in a room before we moved here. But now, my parents forced me to sleep alone in my own bedroom just because there were 3 bedrooms in our new home. In fact, the storage room was directly beneath my bedroom. I could always smell the moldy odor from the room beneath me. At night, I could always hear something scratching, shuffling, or creaking. I've had so many sleepless nights because of those sounds. But the worst of all was that weird, rotten smell I could sometimes get. But no matter what smells we get or what sounds we hear, we were told by the previous owner to not open the door to the storage room. Only the owner would know what he's locked up inside that room. I tried to tell my parents about the sounds I heard and the smells that have been keeping me up all night, but they would casually dismiss them as rats or other critters. That's why the storage room gives me the creeps the most. I've always had the feeling that the sounds or the smells were because of anything but rats. So I decided I had to do something about it. I told myself that it was probably my colorful imagination that's making up things. That night, while I was trying to sleep under my blankets, I heard the usual sounds of scratching and shuffling. Despite having heard of those sounds every night, it still unnerved me. I became nervous and scared until I had to make up my mind that there was no way of dealing with this if I'm scared. So I mustered up all the courage I had and whispered under my blankets, "If there are any spirits or entities here, please show yourselves." And waited. Nothing seemed to happen, so I got a little braver. I removed my blanket and repeated once again. This time I couldn't even hear the shuffling noises from earlier. By the time I finished the second question, I was no longer scared. Relieved, I lay down on my bed, and for the last time, I knocked on the floor 3 times. In the dead silence of the night, as soon as I finished knocking, I heard it from the floor beneath me.